For today's critical thought, we're going to be discussing the topic of diegetic elements when it comes to game design, specifically with UI design. Now, for the longest time, I've called diegetic elements an integrated UI, but last week we had a discussion on Twitter about, and there has been an official term for this for a while. And if I didn't hear about it, I'm sure most of you haven't either. But when we refer to diegetic elements, this is the idea of having in-universe or in video game representations of UI elements or other things that are supposed to exist within that space. So for instance, if all of a sudden you hear ELO playing right now, that will be an example of non-diegetic, because where's it coming from? If Jeff Lynne walks in that way and starts singing Turn to Stone, that will be an example of a diegetic element. It would also be amazing, but I'm afraid it's not going to happen. Now, unlike other aspects that we've talked about in the past when it comes to game design, diegetic elements are not an on or off kind of thing when it comes to video games, but it can exist in different degrees. So, before we get to the footage for today, when we talk about diegetic or non-diegetic elements in a video game, we refer to most commonly the UI itself, be it having a health bar up there, score, an experience bar along the bottom, you name it. The idea is that these elements are usually abstracted and have no in-universe representation. Again, for us, we don't walk around with an experience bar just below our peripheral vision, nor do we hear music playing without a source. But when it comes to video games, diegetic elements do not make or break an experience, but typically they will help to elevate a game. And some of the best titles that we've seen in the last decade, and probably even beyond that, have featured diegetic elements in one way or another. So with that said, we got some footage to bring up of a game that certainly makes use of them, and I am sure you folks watching know what game's about to come up. In Dead Space 2, this is a perfect example of a diegetic UI and what it can do to help elevate a game. As you can see right now, our main character Isaac is the example of the UI in Dead Space. The colored or the vertical bar on his spine denotes his health. That little half circle to the right of that is his special power, while each gun has its own holographic display that shows ammo as well as the targeting reticle. Now, as you look on the screen right now, I think you can notice something. There are no distracting elements on the screen other to get in the way of Isaac. Isaac is front and center of the main focus, and the screen is kept very clean because of that. Everything in game that is represented, or everything that the player needs to know, is represented within the universe itself. And one of the major points that Visceral Games did was to make sure that the player never leaves the focus of Isaac. All cutscenes feature him being thrown around or he's a part of it. You're never going to see a scene in a Dead Space game where the game cuts to two random characters somewhere away from Isaac to discuss things, because that would pull the player out of the experience. And that, in a nutshell, is why diegetic elements are used. It's to keep the player's focus entirely on the game's experience without being distracted by anything else. Now, as we said a few minutes ago, diegetic elements are not on or off, and many video games will feature partial diegetic elements while still having those extra or those abstracted versions. There's a post on Gamma Sutra, which if I can find it here, I'll link it down below or in an annotation, that discussed several major elements of diegetic UI or diegetic design over the years. For instance, in a game like GoldenEye, a diegetic element was in the form of his spy watch being the entire game's menu and status screen. But that game still featured non-diegetic elements such as having ammo displayed in the bottom corner of the screen, or your health flashing and stuff like that. Now, with all that said, another thing to keep in mind about diegetic elements is that it can be very hard to implement them depending on the design in question. action-based or character-based games like Dead Space here are ripe for having digetic elements because you're focusing on a singular character. But what about a strategy game? Can you imagine a game like Stellaris or Europa Universalis having digetic elements? It's a lot harder to do it there because at the end of the day, the player still needs to be given the information they need to succeed or make informed decisions. And trying to hide or remove that information via the in-game representation can lead to frustration. As a good example of this, there is the game Gods Will Be Watching. It's a adventure, I'm not even sure I would describe it, adventure high-stakes puzzle game, which is split into different vignettes where the player must make hard choices while keeping their character alive. And everything about what's going on is represented with digetic elements. The problem, though, is that the game uses the pixel character models to denote different statuses or how these characters are. And it can be very hard to tell looking at a pixel figure if this person is healthy, if they're near death, if they're, below average health, and so on and so forth. With a game like Dead Space, however, again, you can see as clear as day what Isaac's vitals are at any given moment, how much ammo I have in my gun, so on and so forth. Even the game's menu is represented by the holographic rig that he wears. And this is just a great way of representing everything while also kind of making the UI dynamic, because I am only given the information that I am readily needing. Now, obviously, I always need to know what my health and my stasis power are, so that's why it's on my suit. But I don't need to know what my ammo is in my gun if I'm just walking around normally. Instead, it only pops up when I'm actually in combat, like right here. Now, when it comes to good digetic design, again, this is something that it depends on the game in question. And my question for you folks watching this, other than well-known examples such as Dead Space here, GoldenEye, and other ones, can you think of subtle examples of a digetic UI and how they fit into a game? One that I would think of that I played recently would be Alan Wake, and how instead of featuring a targeting reticle for Alan, you use your light source that counts both as a way of hurting enemies and knowing where Alan is aiming at any given point. And as a final bit of a challenge, can you think of a way for a strategy game, whether it's a RTS, Grand, or 4X, that has implemented or could implement digetic elements? But before we wrap things up, one final point that I just want to clarify or bring up again. Like we've said, good video games do not exactly are weighted on digetic elements, as in you're never going to see a reviewer mark up or down a game for featuring them. They're not going to save a bad game or make a game go from good to being a Game of the Year winner. Instead, what we typically find is that really great games where the designers understand all aspects of their development and the gameplay will have digetic elements just kind of as almost a side effect of the great design. And as we've seen over the course of this little video example, it really does help to make a game stand out. And it's one of the reasons why Dead Space 1 and 2 still hold up really well for gamers, because of how clean and how visually interesting the game is by the fact that we're not being distracted by numbers all over the place and timers and stuff like that. But with all that said, thank you so much for watching today's Critical Thought. Be sure to check back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. And if you'd like me to cover a topic in a future video, please don't hesitate to get in touch. But otherwise, I will see you all for another discussion next time. Before we get to the credits, just a quick shout out to the supporters over on patreon.com/gwbeiser. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to check back for our regular streaming, most nights at 9:30, 10 EST, and you'll find a schedule linked down below. For a collection of my writings as well as audio casts on design, you'll find that at game-wisdom.com. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at GWBicer. If you're interested in hanging out and talking about game design topics, we have a Discord channel with the basic tier open to everybody, and that is linked down below as well. If you'd like to support us on Patreon, it is at patreon.com/GWBicer. Your support can help to keep things going and growing, and you can earn rewards such as ad-free versions of our talks, votings for our specific Let's Plays and grab-bag streams, and more. But that's it for now. Thanks again for watching. I hope you come back for more great discussions on design here and on GameWisdom.com, where we examine the art and science of games.